It's been called the Roswell of the UK, only it wasn't a crash. The craft landed, US servicemen touched it, and came away with profound experiences. Today, we'll focus on the event itself. In the next episode, we'll examine the communication downloaded into the brain of one of the servicemen. Let's explore. Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England sits between the twin bases Bentwater to the north and Woodbridge to the west. During the Cold War, they were incredibly important to NATO's strategic defenses of Britain and Europe as a whole. Right after Christmas, in the early morning hours of December 26, 1980, the radar towers at 3 different bases were painted with an unidentified flying object coming in from the east in a direct line towards Rendlesham Forest at a great speed. RAF Bawdsey, RAF Watton, and Heathrow Tower all reported the bogey. Around 3 a.m., Airman First Class John Burroughs had been patrolling the Woodbridge Airbase along with Staff Sergeant Bud Stephens. As they came close to the east gate, they spotted strange lights above the forest. They were red above blue and flickered on and off. Burroughs didn't recognize these lights for any craft he knew from the airfield. They drove towards the east gate to take a closer look and now noted the lights were brighter and white and coming towards them. They'd pick up the landline to call the base law enforcement. On the other end of the line was Sergeant Crass McCabe, who thought they were joking, but contacted Base Central Security Control, kicking the incident up one level to Sergeant John Coffey, shift commander, and he told Flight Chief Sergeant James Penniston to go and investigate. Penniston proceeded on a vehicle to the east gate, accompanied by First Class Airman Ed Cabansaw, and they rendezvoused with Burroughs and Stephens at the east gate, still having no clue what they were there for. Jim remembers being annoyed because of this, that the MPs on duty, Burroughs and Stephens, would call him out without telling him why. After a briefing about the lights descending into the forest, Penniston assumed this was a plane crash or at least an emergency landing. But Stephens insisted it landed in a controlled way. That did not make sense to Penniston, and now he was curious more than anything. Let's remember that 3 control towers had reported a bogey headed to Rendlesham, and at Woodbridge Air Base, by now, 6 servicemen were aware: Burroughs, Stephens, McCabe, Caffey, Cabansaw, and Penniston. This is important to remember because later, when the higher-ups wanted this event to be gone and declared a hoax, we now know there were plenty of participating witnesses. Penniston received a go-ahead from Shift Commander Chandler to exit the base and investigate inside the forest. Penniston asked Chandler for a backup, who in turn decided to become the backup himself, becoming the 7th person on base aware of the incident. He met up with the others about 50 yards down a trail into the forest, where Penniston and team had stopped. The trail was too narrow, they needed to continue on foot. Stephens remained inside the base by the east gate. In order to not lose contact through the handheld radios, Chandler decided to stay by the vehicles while Burroughs, Penniston, and Cabansaw walked into the woods. They all saw the lights at distance between the trees. They behaved nothing like an aircraft, hovering above the forest floor, and the lights looked like nothing they knew: blue, red, white, yellow, shining brightly, and changing, flickering configurations. They continued, however, slowly and carefully. As their handheld radios were losing contact with Chandler, Penniston told Cabansaw to stay put to keep contact with Chandler. Only Penniston and Burroughs continued towards the light. Now they noticed the atmosphere changing in a peculiar way. They felt the presence of powerful static electricity. The hair on their arms and head rose up. A strange silence also fell across the forest. They couldn't hear each other, no animals, not the wind, nor the trees. The environment had become silent, like a vacuum. It became difficult to walk, as if they were walking in high water. As they came closer, a bright and silent explosion of light took place. They ducked for cover, and this is where the experiences of Burroughs and Penniston separate. Following the explosion of light, Penniston stood up and immediately saw a craft appearing where the light had been before. It was metallic, shiny, roughly triangular in shape. It was straight ahead, extremely close, hovering just above ground, with 3 legs sticking out from the bottom. He looked to his right and saw Burroughs suspended in a beam of light. He yelled his name, but couldn't even hear his own voice. Despite what he was seeing, he decided to walk closer. He observed the craft had blue lights around its rim and a bright light on top. It was absolutely silent, hovering above the ground as if sitting on an invisible cushion. It looked opaque black, smooth like glass, and for some reason Penniston still had the mental wherewithal to start sketching what he was seeing in his incident notebook, and he also took several photographs. He decided to walk forward and then touch the craft. It was smooth as glass, except for the symbols that looked like Egyptian hieroglyphs, but he couldn't tell what they were. As he touched the symbols, the light on top increased in brightness, and as he let go, it dimmed again. He stepped back, and the craft lifted incredibly slowly. It ascended above the trees and disappeared towards the ocean. Burroughs' perspective was completely different. After seeing the explosion of light, he remembers ducking for cover and then waking up watching a strange object ascending into the sky and Penniston standing above him. They both walked back to Cabansaw and Chandler, who were both hysterical, stating they feared the worst had happened. They did not see a craft, but they both saw the lights, and they did not know what had happened to them. They returned to base shortly after 4 a.m. Deputy Base Commander Charles Holt showed up and was immediately told by ordinaries that Penniston and Chandler had gone UFO hunting into the night. Holt did not think this was funny and demanded everyone write a report separately and turn in all artifacts collected. A debrief took place around 72 hours later. Both Burroughs and Penniston drew the exact same craft, even if they were interviewed separately. The most peculiar thing was Penniston's watch, which was 45 minutes behind everyone else's clock, including Burroughs. It's as if time had stopped, while for Chandler, Cabansaw, and Burroughs, 45 minutes had passed. Penniston felt his close encounter with the craft lasted only about 3 to 4 minutes, but apparently it lasted at least 45 minutes. 2 days later, on the 28th of December, Holt went back into the forest with Penniston and Burroughs with radiation detectors and found 3 indents in the forest floor where the Penniston said he had seen the craft. Radiation was elevated in the area and highest inside the 3 footprints. Holt wrote a detailed memo on this and recorded the events of the 28th, including the debriefs of Penniston, Burroughs, Cabansaw, and Chandler, and he filed an incident report number 1569. When the story broke in January 1981, where the existence of the Holt memo and the Holt tape was made public, Base Commander Ted Conrad quickly took control of the narrative by calling the whole thing a hoax. Nothing real had happened, he said, and further berated Holt for entertaining this prank to the degree that he did, with reports and recordings all perpetrated upon him by his subordinates as a holiday prank. That's when the myth was born, and as is the case with every UFO incident, the division between believers and hoaxers was established, with plenty of doubt sowed in. Oddly, the radar logbooks for the holidays, for the twin bases as well as the 3 towers, including Heathrow, none of their logbooks showed a bogey painted at any time the evening of the 25th or the morning of the 26th of December. It had all been erased. By whom, you may ask? Well, a farmhand named Vince Thurkettle was chopping wood near Rendlesham on December 28th when he was visited by 2 men dressed in dark suits. They asked him what he saw that night and the morning of the 26th, and he told them the truth. He saw nothing. He did hear animals howling, however, and this detail is corroborated by Penniston and Burroughs, remembering that animals of nearby farms were whipped into a frenzy prior to them entering the silent vacuum produced by the craft. But who were the men in black? A topic for another episode. No one knew of Holt's document until January. Regardless, in December, these two dark-suited characters were already visiting farms to clean up and control the story. Penniston didn't speak of this for a long time, and one of the controversies surrounding this story is his initial statement in the Holt report that does not mention him approaching the craft to touch it. That's because he didn't know he did that at the time. It was only discovered years later through hypnotic regression therapy. He came forward thereafter, retired from the military, with claims even more extraordinary than simply being an eyewitness to an unidentified aerial phenomena. He believes that touching the craft triggered a download of information into his brain in binary code that would take decades to decipher. This we will discuss in the next episode here on Project Bluebook. You can watch and listen to this and other podcasts on the Project Bluebook YouTube channel, the place for the exploration of all things unidentified. Each day, let's practice compassion and kindness. I am Thor, and thanks for listening. See you next time.